Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. We are doing another episode of Couch Chats with Sarah. Last week we focused on advice for student teachers, and this week we are going to be focused on advice for first year teachers. Thank y'all so much for 10K on Instagram, by the way. I am so excited about that and I can't wait to grow on here as well. Let's get into the tips. Okay, so tip number one, I tell every single new teacher this because I did this and I'm so grateful that I did. When you are getting your first teaching job, make sure that you do not buy anything, and if you buy some things, that's okay, save the receipts. Don't buy a lot before you go into your classroom and talk with the admin or the team. Make sure you go in and look into your classroom before you start to buy tons of stuff because you really don't know what's left for you and you don't know how much they're providing you. For example, if you are taking over a position from somebody who's retiring, a retiring teacher, odds are you might hit the jackpot and they might leave you tons of stuff. Now that's not saying that you're gonna keep all of it, but definitely take a look because if you have a retired teacher, they usually leave lots of stuff and lots of goodies. Second, when I got my first teaching job, they provided me with a ton of stuff. Somebody just asked me this on Instagram yesterday, actually, asked what my school provided for me. And I know that this is not across the board for every single school, but it might be similar to what other schools provide you. I had so much furniture in my classroom that was kept for me, like tables and chairs. Flexible seating was provided for me from my school. A lot of math manipulatives, so like dice and shapes and Unifix cubes. They gave me a set of all that. Counting bears, things like that were already given to me, and those are expensive manipulatives and materials. Number lines, all the foundations, grammar kits and things like that. So a lot of curriculum things too was already given to me. So I should not have spent any money on that, and I didn't because I waited. So you should wait too because you don't want to not only spend money that you don't need to spend, but if you don't save those receipts, you're gonna be stuck with a whole lot of extra stuff. And this is a separate tip, but it seems to go along with it. So this is tip number 2, and it's in a similar mind space. When you are a first year teacher, hopefully, you are going to get a lot of donations from parents, from other teachers you work with, from Facebook. You're gonna get a lot of stuff. And some of it might be really good, and some of it might not be good. Do not keep all that stuff. Do not keep donations that you were given just to have it because, well, I'm a first year teacher and I need to have everything possible. It's not true. Because take it from a teacher right now who's going into her 3rd year, and I had a resource closet full of junk that was given to me by other teachers that they didn't use for years and then passed on to me and I didn't use for 2 years. So don't do that to yourself. If you get something that's really useful and beneficial to your classroom, absolutely take it. But if you notice that you didn't use it that first year or even the first couple years, it's time to let it go. Same thing with like if you get a lot of books from teachers and stuff and you realize that you're not gonna use those books, they're not the right grade level for you, they're not appropriate for the age level that you're teaching, they're too challenging, they're too easy. Don't hold on to those because odds are you're not gonna switch grade levels and use them. And if you do switch grade levels someday, you're probably gonna want new books or you'll get new donations anyway. Something that I really enjoyed doing my first year of teaching was going through all the books that people gave me, and then I would find the ones that I didn't want or need anymore, and I would then kind of spread the love and donate those to other either future teachers or new teachers like myself. So I remember dropping off like bags of books to one of my friends from college because she didn't know what grade level she was gonna teach. It made sense for her to have those so that she could decipher if she was gonna need them or not, but I knew I didn't need them, so I didn't wanna keep them. So that was tip 1 and 2 together. Tip 1 was to not buy a lot of stuff before you go into your classroom and see what they're giving you. And tip 2 is not to save everything just because you're a first year teacher. Just get rid of that hoarder mentality. And I'm saying that as somebody who hoarded my first 2 years, and I'm trying to get better about it. If you are looking for donations, some of my favorite, most successful places that I was able to get teacher things, this is after I went into my classroom and figured out what I needed, make a list of everything you need. Lists are the best way to go. Here are some of the best places that I got teacher-like things for my classroom. Facebook, I put out requests for donations and just listed things that I was looking for, or you can just say you're a teacher and if anybody's getting rid of stuff, books especially, I knew so many parents from when I used to work at a daycare that I was friends with on Facebook that were just going through their kids' library at home and had so many like really good books to give to me, because even though it's nice to get books from retired teachers or current teachers, they're not usually in the best shape because, you know, we know that kids at school don't treat their books very nicely, whereas books bought by parents at home and then aren't used as much are usually in better condition. So Facebook and Facebook Marketplace, I got so much furniture from my classroom off of Facebook Marketplace for a very affordable price. Up here we have Savers and Salvation Army. I don't know if whoever's watching this, if y'all have those near you. Savers is great because, at least the ones near me, every 4 books you buy, you get the 5th book for free, and they're typically like 99 cents a book, so they're very affordable. So Savers, Salvation Army, Facebook Marketplace, and the last one I was going to suggest is yard sales. I remember my first year teaching the summer before, I went to a bunch of like teacher labeled yard sales. Like, it wasn't like I went to regular yard sales and found teacher stuff, although that happened sometimes. I went to teacher specific yard sales. I went to this one that was like an hour away twice. She had this sale twice, and she had so many resources, like labeled, laminated things that she had already made as a retired teacher, was looking to get away from. I think I could do a whole YouTube video on things that I got from a retired teacher at a yard sale that I use every single week in my classroom now. So definitely worth the trip if you find one that's local to you. Yard sales are the best. So like I said, that was kind of like 3 tips all in one, but I was only counting it as 1 tip about making sure that you don't spend too much money and making sure how you're spending your money is smart and that you're shopping in the right places. Now that we're past that, tip number 2 is you need to ask your school, if they haven't already told you, you need to ask your school if you're going to be provided with a mentor. So for my first year of teaching, they gave me a mentor. Since it was the school that I did my student teaching at, I had already worked with one of the first grade teachers there, and I was hoping I'd get her, but they wanted to give me kind of like a clean slate, work with somebody new, which ended up being really good for me. So I had a mentor in my grade level that we had the same prep period, so we would meet once a week. She was there to answer all of my questions, to help me with everything that I needed, and sort of be my guide to my first year of teaching. And even though my first year was cut short, she still helps me even this year as a second year teacher. So make sure that they're going to give you a mentor. If they're not going to give you a mentor, maybe they don't do a first year mentor program. That stinks, I'm sorry. Find somebody instead that can act as a mentor to you. So not getting paid, obviously, which is unfortunate, but make sure you get them a really nice gift at the end of the year. Find somebody that you trust, that you get along with, somebody that you work well with, that you can kind of be that they can kind of be your go-to person when you have questions, when you need advice, when you're not sure how to navigate something in the classroom. You need somebody that you can always count on, because it's so much easier to have somebody that you work with versus going to the principal every single time. Principals are busy, so you need somebody in your grade level that can help you. Similar to this, if it's not a mentor, maybe it's somebody that is also a first year teacher in your grade level and you wanna kind of navigate this together. Like a teacher bestie. It's not a mentor, it's like a teacher bestie where you're kind of just keeping each other accountable, helping each other. You need somebody like that in your life, either a mentor or a teacher bestie, somebody that you can kind of figure things out with your first year of teaching. So I highly suggest you advocate for yourself. Ask if you have a mentor for your first year, and maybe if you ask and they don't have that, maybe it'll put the idea in their brain to start it. Tip number 2 is to ask about whether or not you're gonna have a mentor, and if you don't have one provided for you, you need to find somebody that you trust and like and can work with all year. Tip number 3. This one is regarding the first 6 weeks of school. Now, I think of it as the first 6 weeks of school because I read the book by Responsive Classroom about the first 6 weeks of school. Every school is probably a little bit different about how long you spend setting up those expectations and procedures and routines. But at my school, we spend the first 6 weeks setting up those standards for our classroom. Do not underestimate how long it takes to set up routines, procedures, and expectations. I remember going into my first year teaching, and I had read the book, the first 6 weeks of school, and I was like, why does it take this long? Like, I'm gonna do this in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. Like, I'm not spending 6 weeks on expectations and procedures and standards and rules. You really do though. Tip number 3 is be very intentional with your standards and expectations those first 6 weeks of school, because boy, does it save you down the road. I still remember my first year feeling like it was such a long time to spend on things like procedures, like, okay, this is what you do if you have to go to the bathroom, and this is what you do when it's time to line up for lunch, and this is what you do when we're going out to recess. It feels so repetitive and so unnecessary in the moment, but you're going to be really grateful that you had those expectations set up and that you spent so much time on them, because it will carry you throughout the school year and really set up the expectations for those kiddos, whatever age group you're working with. And I feel like this, as a first grade teacher, 6 weeks is definitely enough time. And if not, we end up reviewing it for months at the beginning of the school year. Also, a little plug for the Responsive Classroom for 6 weeks of school. If you have not read that book or heard about it, I would highly recommend it to anybody that teaches at the primary level. I think it's maybe K-5. I forget what the grade levels are, but it's definitely for primary or early childhood classrooms. Tip number 4 is about classroom management. I'm gonna be super honest. I did not do a lot with classroom management my first year. All I did was secret student, which was very low maintenance. And I don't even know if you'd call that classroom management, because I only really did it because I felt like I had to do something with my kids. I really don't think they even needed it. I had such a well-behaved and like really expected, that's the language we use at my school, like very expected class my first year. My second year, I had quite the opposite. It was a challenging group and we needed a lot of reminders and we needed to review the expectations quite frequently. I'm sure a lot of that was played into the part of, being hybrid at the beginning of the year and not getting to set up those classroom expectations, spending that first 6 weeks of school with your classroom teacher in person like my first group did. So there's definitely a lot that played into that. But classroom expectations and creating classroom management, find something you really like and stick with it. And more than just finding something you really like, find something that really works and stick with it, because I think I tried everything under the sun this year. I mean, I tried secret student, I tried desk pets, I tried the reward tickets where I punched them and they had coupons that they'd earn. We did a claw machine for Mystery Walker. I mean, I tried everything with this group. And I wish that I hadn't. I wish I had kind of just found something that worked for them and stuck with it. Now, this group didn't really stick with something for a very long time. They kind of would get bored of it. But my hope for next year as a third year teacher is to find a style of classroom management that I like and just stick with it, because I feel like me switching up our classroom management styles every couple months or weeks of school wasn't that great for this group because there was no consistency. So that's my kind of grow moment for next year, is I want to get better at just picking a classroom management technique and just running with it, sticking with it and seeing it through, instead of getting bored or kind of getting frustrated with what I picked and switching it because I saw something on Instagram or TikTok that I liked better. It's really not about like what's in, like I tried desk pets because they were in and everybody else was doing them. It ended up working for my students really well, but if it didn't, doesn't mean you have to do it. I hope that makes sense. You don't have to just do these different classroom management styles and strategies just because they're in right now and they're popular and everybody else is doing them. You have to do what works for your students and try and be intentional and consistent with it, because it helps create those classroom expectations. It makes classroom management so much easier for them and for you, because honestly, looking back at this year, changing everything up, the desk pets, the secret student, the coupon cards, was a lot of work on my part as a teacher. So it's not only, less consistent for them, but it's a lot of work for you. All right, this feels like a good closing tip. And again, I tell this to everybody that is becoming a teacher, whether you're, a student teacher or you're a first year teacher. I say this to everybody because it's a pretty vague piece of advice, but I'll explain what I mean by this. Tip number 5 is to be intentional in everything you do. And I'm pretty sure I said this to my student teachers as well, because it applies to them too in my last video. When I say be intentional with everything you do, this is what I mean. If you are planning to be in this grade level for a while, and obviously things happen, you switch grade levels, you switch schools, you move, that's not always possible for everybody. But as somebody now who's been in first grade for almost 3 years, including my student teaching, my first year and my second year, wow, am I so glad that I spent really, really valuable time creating resources, creating habits that I've been able to stick with for the last 3 years. So definitely be intentional with what you do, how you plan. I mean, guys, I created a lesson plan for everything I did my first year of teaching. Granted, we ended in March, so I didn't get to see it through for a whole year, but I lesson planned for the whole year, and I saved all of those in a Google Drive, and I used them quite a bit this year for my second year. And obviously, as we hit March and then we hit the spring and I hadn't done this part of teaching yet from my first year, that I needed to create new lesson plans for, but here I am now ready to go in my third year, and I've taught a whole year in first grade over the course of 2 years, a whole full year in first grade, and now I know what to do, and I will be so much better prepared this year, and it'll be so much easier because I was diligent and intentional with creating lesson plans. And I don't mean like 10-page lesson plans like you had to do in college. I mean like writing down for each subject for each day what I was going to teach, what BrainPop videos I was using, what YouTube videos I was using, what lessons I was using, etc. Something I started this year that was really helpful too, that I'm hoping again that I can do all next year, so I set myself up for success. Midway this year, I started using a slide deck, which showed like my morning message. It had timers and, read alouds in it for like snack time. It had our quiet time music all set up. It had our daily 5 schedule in there. Creating a slide deck was such a purposeful and intentional thing for me to do this year, because next year I'll already have those resources created, and it will just make things so much smoother next year. So that is tip number 5. Be intentional in everything you do. If you're not going to be in the grade level next year, you're switching grade levels, it might be really hard for you to do this and apply this and be intentional, because you know that things are going to be different, but there are still habits that you can create and things like that help you in the future years. For example, I created a sort of planning schedule this year, where on Wednesdays I did my lesson planning, on Thursdays I created my slide deck, on Friday I printed my materials, things like that. So even if you're not going to be in the same grade level, you can still be intentional and driven and purposeful, and it will still benefit you wherever you end up. All right, friends, that's all I have for you today. I wanted to keep it brief. So those are my 5 tips for first-year teachers, but gosh, I could say so much more. So be sure to follow me on TikTok and Instagram at _BigHeartLittleMinds, because I share a lot of advice and tips and tricks and things like that on those platforms as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.